Hello and welcome to the Adroit Dojo podcast. This is episode 7 and I am your host, Travis. Today we're going to be talking about the topic of black belt tests. And like many of my podcasts, I bet this one is going to make many people angry. It's going to be split into three talking points. First one, why I dislike most black belt tests. 2, what is a black belt test, and what should it test and be comprised of? And then 3, be going over the black belt test for my art. So starting things off, why I dislike most of the black belt test. 1, they are poorly designed. They have an emphasis. There we go. They have an overemphasis on endurance, and that's being tested mostly via superfluous things like push-ups, sit-ups. It's supposed to be a mental test, sure, and a physical test, but the problem with things like push-ups, sit-ups is younger people, thinner people just naturally be better at it. So 100 push-ups for one person is a warm-up. 100 push-ups for another might be impossible due to age, weight, injuries. And, the person who can do 1,000,000 push-ups might be a way better fighter with way better technique. So it's just dumb. A lot of the black belt tests I've seen also have minimum tests for their ability to perform techniques. A lot don't even demonstrate or test how the candidate applies the techniques. Sure, maybe there's some sparring, maybe there's some board breaking, but you spar maybe once, board break once or twice. There's minimal sparring, as I just mentioned, minimum proof of one's ability to fight. There's no test for situational awareness, tactics, strategy, and so on. So why do they add calisthenics to test the mental fortitude? Why not use more relevant art and combat related tests? Like more sparring, more tactics, strategies, maybe scenarios, and then finally, essays. Why? Why are you writing a fucking essay for your black belt? This isn't college. This isn't high school. This is a test for your knowledge and capability as a fighter and a representative of your art and school. The fuck does an essay have to do with any of that? Alright, moving on. What should the black belt test and what should be comprised of that test? So some arts, it simply checks to make sure one has learned all the fundamentals. Other arts, it's a proof of mastery of the art. So, a black belt test should test the candidate physically and mentally. And it really depends on the art itself, whether it's just a demonstration of, hey, you have the basics, or hey, you're basically a certified badass in your art. And so, of course, it should all be represented there. So, if you're going to be a badass in the art, it needs to be even harder, of course. I'd say with more sparring, more scenario drills, etc. Does the candidate have the proper skills? This can be tested via technique, demonstrations, or kata, or board breaking even, or even heavy bag work. Basically, just something where you come in contact, I think, with an external object is probably the best way to prove you have good skills. Because just shadow boxing or doing a kata, it's not necessarily always translates. Does the candidate know how to apply or counter the techniques in a fight? That's a good one, and I think most black belt tests don't test this at all. It's like, why are you a black belt if you don't even know how to counter basic things like a kick, a punch, a takedown, or headlock, things like that? Leaves you so vulnerable. So good ways to test that is, again, sparring scenarios. Does the candidate understand how best to move, apply strategy, and use clever tactics? Does an essay help with that? No. Does a bajillion push-ups or sit-ups help with that? No. You know what does help with one to demonstrate they can move and apply strategy and clever tactics? Sparring and scenario drills. Does the candidate know the dojo's history and values? Does he know the art's history? Congratulations, essay lovers, you finally have one. This is the one area where you can just waste your fucking time writing a paper to test that. But there's better ways, like a verbal test, or done as a pre-test. If they're going to be a black belt, that means they should be at the level where they're instructing lower belts. So the pre-test should be them teaching the white belts all that, the history, the values, etc. Because if they really know it, they should be able to relay that just off the top of their head. They shouldn't have to have the time requirements of an essay. Plus, it's like, we're not in college, man. Do you really want your candidate just dropping down a 5-page essay, throwing in a bunch of useless filler that they learned to do from college or high school? Just a waste of everyone's time. Also, this is a martial art test, not a CrossFit test. So why do schools include so many calisthenics? Push-ups, sit-ups, squats, running. I mean, that's great. You do want your black belt to be fit, but if you want to test their cardio, endurance, and mental strength, just have them spar more, such as every single person in the dojo for their test, or several people versus them, or any other kind of scenario you can think of, like someone grabs them by the back of their head, or several people jump them, something like that. There's almost infinite ideas. So you want to test their tenacity or adaptability. Again, sparring scenarios, just like I mentioned. There's so many things you can do. Like maybe you have them walk towards a certain wall, and then someone comes out, does a double leg takedown, they have to defend it. If they don't defend it, they need to be able to get back up in a certain amount of time. So I think there's an overemphasis on silly things such as the essay, push-ups, sit-ups, katas, static proof of technique by doing kihon or forms. And really, I think it boils down to just applying actual self-defense techniques in various scenarios, proving your capability of how to apply your arts via sparring the scenarios, how to strategize, use tactics, using your environment if you're fighting more than one person, and so on. So this is part 1, and then part 2 will be the next episode where I go over what our test consists of. Thank you, and this has been Travis with The Strength. We are now the Adroit Dojo podcast. Too many dojos named Strength Dojo.